One night, while cleaning my husband's car, I found a tube of lubricant under the mat. Silently, I poured acid into it. "What the hell?" he screamed the next morning. The whole neighborhood gathered when his cries pierced even through closed windows. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. Ethan came home late again. The clock on the mantel read 11:47 p.m. Its tick loud enough to feel like a hammer in my skull. The garage door groaned shut. Then the front door swung open. I didn't even bother pretending to be asleep on the couch anymore. His cologne entered the room before he did. Expensive, sharp, heavy with cedar. But tonight it wasn't alone. Beneath it lingered a sweetness, something floral and cheap, the kind of perfume young women buy at dear asterisk stores. The combination was nauseating and instantly wrong. "Another long night," he muttered, loosening his tie as though it had been strangling him. "Meeting ran over. Clients never stop talking." I nodded absently. The same excuse he had rehearsed 100 times, said with just enough weariness to sound believable to anyone who wanted to believe. Once I would have jumped up to serve him tea, asked if he ate enough. Tonight I stayed seated, my eyes following him with the same detached caution one gives a stranger in their own home. He brushed a kiss against the air near my cheek, a habit that had replaced any real affection years ago. Then he disappeared into the bedroom. Moments later, the springs of our old bed creaked, and his breathing deepened into that familiar snore. For most of our marriage, that sound had been my lullaby. Now it mocked me, a lullaby for the fool. I rose, restless, moving about the living room like a ghost. I tidied up the coffee table, folded his jacket, straightened the magazines he had tossed aside. Little rituals of order in a house that no longer felt like mine. His phone buzzed, screen glowing against the dark wood. I shouldn't have looked. For decades I hadn't. But the glow caught me. My eyes, traitors themselves, flicked down. "You were incredible tonight, Dad Redheart." The words seared into me like hot iron. Dad. My mind stumbled. Caleb, our son, would never write that. He was 35, busy with his own life, and he barely texted Ethan at all, let alone with such an asterisk Macy. No, this was someone else. A stranger. A stranger who called my husband Dad and paired it with a heart, bold red against the pale screen. I set the phone down with trembling fingers. My breath came shallow, as though the walls had closed in. In 40 years together, I had never doubted Ethan's loyalty. He was difficult, yes. Cold at times. A man who loved control more than tenderness. But unfaithful? Never. At least that was the illusion I clung to. Now the illusion cracked. I went to the entry table where his wallet lay open, its leather worn smooth from decades of habit. A folded receipt slipped out as I lifted it. Tucson, not Phoenix. A high-end steakhouse, dinner for two, filet mignon and pasta. A bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, the same one he once brought home for our 20th anniversary. A wine I still remembered for its smoky taste, the way it had made me feel cherished if only for one night. He had told me earlier he was dining with partners in Phoenix. Tucson was 2 hours away. And partners don't order Cabernet by candlelight. My hand shook as I snapped a photo of the receipt. The phone's camera clicked, each sound like a nail in the coffin of my trust. I should have stopped. I should have shoved the receipt back and swallowed the poison of doubt. But something in me had woken, something that refused to be lied to anymore. The garage smelled of dust and gasoline when I opened the door. His pickup sat heavy and silent, a beast of habit. I slid my hand under the seat, searching, compelled by instinct. My fingers brushed plastic. I pulled out a half-empty tube of personal lubricant. The kind meant to smooth an asterisk Macy. We hadn't been in asterisk made in years. Not since Ethan had claimed fatigue, age, stress. His touch had become foreign. His body a locked vault. And yet here was this tube, damning in its presence. Beside it, crumpled napkins reeked of perfume. Not mine. Not the soft lavender I had worn since college, but something gaudy, loud, desperate. The smell clung to my skin, my hair, my throat. I almost gagged. I photographed each item. The tube, the napkins, the damning residue of a passion I was no longer part of. Evidence mounted quietly in my phone, transforming it into an archive of betrayal. I leaned against the cool wall of the garage, my chest tight. Memories assaulted me. 40 years of marriage unspooling like an old film reel. The day we bought this house, with Ethan promising me it would be forever. The countless nights I stayed awake rocking Caleb while Ethan slept through his cries. The years I worked double shifts at the diner so Ethan could invest in his career. The holidays I prepared feasts alone while he arrived late, smelling of boardrooms and whiskey. Each memory once framed as sacrifice now revealed itself as evidence of my blindness. I had been performing devotion on a stage he built, a set of promises, a backdrop of security, all of it hollow. I thought of the anniversary dinners, the vacations postponed for his work, the way I excused his silence at night as exhaustion instead of indifference. And all the while, he had been crafting another life. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling my heart like a frantic bird. 40 years. 40 years I had poured myself into this man, this marriage, this illusion. And here I stood, a wife clutching proof that she had been nothing but an understudy in her own home. The silence of the garage roared in my ears. The truck loomed complicit. I stared at the greasy floor, littered with oil stains and fragments of our life. Caleb's old baseball glove in the corner, a broken rake, boxes of Christmas decorations I'd insisted we keep though Ethan scoffed at sentimentality. It all felt staged now. Every memory, every object, props on a set I had mistaken for reality. I walked back into the house, each step heavier than the last. In the kitchen I laid the receipt, the napkins and the tube on the counter, staring at them under the cold fluorescent light. They looked ordinary, almost laughably so. Yet they carried the weight of 40 years of deception. I didn't cry. My tears had dried up years ago, long before tonight. What I felt now wasn't sorrow but clarity, sharp, cutting, merciless. I picked up my phone, organized the photos into a new folder, and labeled it with a single word, truth. That night, I didn't crawl into bed beside Ethan. I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of the folder lighting my face. His snores echoed down the hallway, steady and shameless. 40 years of marriage shifted beneath me like an earthquake. And for the first time I allowed myself to admit, this house wasn't a home. It was a stage. And I, Nora, had been playing a role written for me. The dutiful wife, the silent believer, the woman who never asked too many questions. The curtain had fallen, and I would never play that role again. The morning after I found the tube, the napkins, the perfume, I still cooked breakfast. Muscle memory guided me, not love. Eggs cracked against the bowl, bacon sizzling in the pan, coffee dripping dark and bitter. I moved like a machine, each motion a shield against the chaos in my chest. Ethan shuffled in, yawning, his tie hanging around his neck like a leash he could slip free of whenever he wanted. He sat at the table, his phone in hand, his face lit by the blue glow of emails that likely hid more than they revealed. "Morning," he muttered, not looking at me. "Morning," I echoed, placing his plate in front of him. He launched into the same lines, as predictable as the tick of the clock. "Busy day. Meetings stacked all afternoon. Might run late again." I nodded. Of course. Inside my stomach turned. I thought of the receipt from Tucson, the perfume-sick napkins, the word dad with a red heart. His lines had once comforted me. Now they sounded like a script. He chewed his toast as though nothing had shifted, as though I hadn't stayed awake cataloging his betrayal. I wanted to ask who was she? I wanted to scream how could you? But I didn't. Silence is sometimes the sharper blade. I let him eat, let him believe I was still the fool. When he left, kissing the air again instead of me, I watched him through the blinds. He climbed into his pickup, the very vehicle that held the evidence of his other life, and drove off with a wave that belonged more to a neighbor than a husband. The moment his taillights vanished, I called Mrs. Rivers. We hadn't spoken in months. She was an old friend, one of the few women who had seen me in the early years, the sleepless nights with Caleb, the late shifts at the diner, the pride I once carried in Ethan's supposed loyalty. She picked up on the second ring. "Nora? My goodness, is everything all right?" I hesitated, then forced the words out. "Do you still know that investigator you once mentioned? The one you said helped your cousin?" A pause. "Grant. Yes. Why? What's going on?" I almost broke then, almost spilled everything. But pride stitched my lips shut. "I just need the number," I whispered. By noon, I was sitting across from him in a small coffee shop 2 towns over, far enough that no one from our circle would see. Grant was a man built for shadows. Plain shirt, no tie, hair cropped close. His eyes, however, gave him away. Steady, calm, the kind of eyes that had seen too many truths stripped bare. I slid a flash drive across the table. On it were the photos, the receipt, the email, the lubricant, the napkins. Proof that I wasn't paranoid, that I wasn't inventing monsters in the dark. He studied me before speaking. You want surveillance? Yes. My voice cracked, but I held his gaze. I want the truth. Whatever it costs. He nodded once, as if this request was as ordinary as ordering coffee. I'll start tonight. Discretion guaranteed. You'll hear from me by evening. I exhaled, realizing I had been holding my breath since the garage last night. As I left the cafe, the world felt altered, tilted. I had taken the first step into a different life. One where secrets would no longer rot quietly. Driving back, I passed the glowing sign of my diner chain. Nora's. Once seeing it filled me with pride. It was my empire, built from sleepless mornings kneading dough, from afternoons scrubbing grease, from nights serving coffee with a tired smile. Ethan had invested nothing but his absence, and yet he strutted around as if it were his legacy too. I stared at the sign that bore my name and thought not of revenue but of risks. How fragile it all was, the business, the home, the reputation I had carried like a shield. He had been slipping away while I carried the weight of everything. For decades I carried our family, our son, our livelihood. And he carried lies. That night, Grant's first text arrived. Starting surveillance. First materials tonight. I sat in the empty diner, lights low, the smell of coffee grounds lingering. My staff had gone home. Only the neon glow of the sign bled through the windows. I should have been tallying receipts, checking tomorrow's order sheets. Instead, I opened my phone and stared at the empty folder labeled Truth. Waiting. I remembered the early years of the diner when we could barely pay rent. I worked 16-hour shifts, and Ethan promised it was temporary. He said his own career would flourish soon, that my labor was only until his big break. That break never came. What came instead were excuses, business dinners, and long absences I accepted as noble sacrifices. Every new location of Nora's had been a battlefield. Against banks, against exhaustion, against my own doubts. I carried it all. And I carried Ethan too. When he forgot anniversaries, I smiled. When he spent weekends working, I baked pies and told myself he was providing. When he grew distant, I told myself he was tired, not cruel. Now I knew the truth. He had been practicing betrayal all along. Hours passed. Midnight approached. My phone buzzed again. A new message from Grant. Evidence collected. Sending in the morning. I sat alone in the dim diner, the hum of refrigerators filling the silence, and realized I wasn't afraid anymore. The truth was no longer a shadow. It was a P*N. Tomorrow the masks would begin to fall. The message came just after dawn. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, its glow cutting through the thin veil of sleep I had managed. I reached for it, pulse already quickening. Grant's name on the screen. First file attached. The air in the room thickened. My hands trembled as I tapped the link. A single photo filled the screen. Ethan in a crisp blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, stepping into a dim-lit restaurant. His hand wasn't empty. He was holding another hand. I zoomed in, praying my eyes were wrong. But no, the hand belonged to Mia, my daughter-in-law. The world tilted violently. Her dress was tight, clinging in all the ways a young woman wants to be admired. Red lipstick curved into a smile I had once thought innocent. She tilted her head toward Ethan, the way lovers do when the world shrinks to two people. I dropped the phone onto the sheets. My breath came short, ragged. Not a stranger. Not a secretary. Not even some faceless woman from a bar. But Mia. The wife of my only son. The woman I had embraced like a daughter. The woman I had taught family recipes, who had sat at my kitchen counter while I told her about the struggles of building Nora's from scratch. My stomach twisted violently, as though betrayal itself had weight. I picked up the phone again, forcing myself to keep watching. The next *T. A table set with candles and flowers. 2 glasses raised, clinking in a private toast. Ethan's face softened, lit with a warmth I hadn't seen in decades. That gaze, protective, tender, alive. It belonged to the man I married, but he no longer gave it to me. He had given it to her. The next file was a video. The cafe's murmur hummed in the background, plates clinking faintly. I pressed play. Mia leaned across the table, whispering into Ethan's ear. He laughed. Not the low grunt he gave me when I tried a joke, but a full, unguarded laugh. A sound I hadn't heard in so long that it jolted me. He touched her wrist, casual and asterisk mate. She smiled as though she'd won something. And she had. At the end of the video he rose, walking with her to the door. He opened the car door with a gallantry that had long disappeared from our marriage. She slid inside, her smile wide while he lingered, glancing around, cautious. Then he entered beside her. I paused the video, staring at the frozen frame. Ethan's hand on her knee, her lipstick leaving a faint print on his cheek. I saved it to the folder labeled Truth. The digital weight of it pressed down harder than any physical object. I should have screamed. Should have hurled the phone across the room. Instead, I sat in silence, the fury inside me compacting into something dense, unmovable. For years I had excused his distance. He's tired. He's stressed. He's getting older. But no, he hadn't grown cold. He had simply redirected the warmth to someone else. Someone who should have been untouchable. I opened the old photo albums from the closet. Dust clung to my fingers as I flipped through decades of birthdays and holidays. On Caleb's 32nd birthday we all stood together. Mia hugging my son, Ethan's arm looped around me, our smiles stitched together like fabric. I traced the image with my nail until it caught, slicing the paper. The photo cut me back, the edge sharp. I thought of family dinners where Mia avoided Ethan's gaze, playing the role of a dutiful daughter-in-law. How had I missed it? Their distance had been theater. Each carefully measured silence, each staged indifference. Flawless acting designed for me, for Caleb, for everyone else. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been rehearsed for years. By afternoon more files arrived. Ethan and Mia again, this time outside a law office. Their postures were casual, practiced. They could have been colleagues, if not for the way his arm brushed hers, if not for the way she tilted her head when she laughed, her mouth too close to his. Another clip. Ethan handing her a coffee, holding the cup out with both hands like it was a gift. She touched his wrist in return. His eyes softened. That softness, once mine, now a stranger's. I pressed pause. The silence of the house pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. Every corner of this place held echoes of the life I had built. The dent in the kitchen counter from when Caleb dropped a SK asterisklet. The faded rug Ethan once said he hated but I refused to replace. 40 years carved into these walls, all now turned against me. I stared at the evidence and realized something bitter. The betrayal wasn't just Ethan's. It was Mia's too. She had entered our family, accepted my love, my gifts, my recipes, all while plotting this. She had played the role of grateful wife, of supportive daughter-in-law. And I had believed her. I remembered the first Christmas she spent with us. She had helped me bake pies, her laughter filling the kitchen. She had wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Thank you for making me feel like family." I had cried then, foolish tears of joy. Now I saw the truth. That embrace was rehearsed. That gratitude, counterfeit. Grant's last message of the day arrived just before sundown. Pattern consistent. They're meeting regularly. More to follow. I sat in the kitchen, the evidence spread before me. The photos, the videos, the receipts. Proof layered on proof, each piece cutting deeper. The house grew darker, but I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the shadows, my face lit only by the glow of betrayal preserved on my phone. For the first time since the discovery, tears came. Not hot, not loud, but cold and silent. They slid down my cheeks without sound, as though my body grieved while my mind had already gone cold. 40 years of marriage. 40 years of sacrifice. And here was the truth. The man I trusted had chosen not just another woman, but my son's wife. The wound was deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just infidelity. It was incestuous in its cruelty. It destroyed not only a marriage but a family. I closed my eyes and all I saw was the image of Ethan's gaze, tender, unguarded, belonging to Mia. It was then I understood. This wasn't simply betrayal. It was war. And I would not lose. The next morning, my phone buzzed before the sun had even risen. Grant never wasted words. Check your inbox. More files. I sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking into dawn, its sound sharp as a gavel. I opened the folder he'd sent, my throat tight. The first photo. Ethan and Mia leaving a downtown law office, sunlight gleaming off glass doors behind them. They walked side by side, not quite touching, but their bodies leaned toward each other, a rhythm too natural to be innocent. She wore a fitted blazer, her hair tied in a neat ponytail, sunglasses shielding her eyes. He carried a folder under one arm. They looked like colleagues, maybe even partners. But then I zoomed in. His fingers brushed her lower back as they stepped into the street. A small gesture, casual and damning. The second series of images hit harder. A boutique complex I knew well, Saguaro Lofts. New, expensive, designed for discretion. Grant had followed them inside. The camera caught them on a third-floor balcony. Ethan's arm curved possessively around Mia's waist. Her head rested against his shoulder, her lipstick faintly smudging the blue of his shirt. And then a quick kiss. Not hesitant. Not accidental. A kiss born of routine, of familiarity. I froze. My denial, already fragile, shattered. Just hours earlier, Ethan had texted me. His words still lingered on my phone. Partner from out of town, long night. Rest, love. Tender, gentle. Lies lacquered over betrayal. Now, staring at the kiss, the tenderness in his text felt obscene. He had written love while kissing Mia's mouth. He had called me rest while holding her body. I printed the photos one by one, each sheet sliding from the printer with the weight of judgment. I slipped them into a thick envelope and tucked it beneath the family albums in the hallway cabinet. I flipped through one album before sliding the envelope in. Caleb's birthday 4 years ago. In the picture he hugged Mia, smiling wide, young and proud. Ethan stood with his arm around me, our bodies touching, our smiles wide for the camera. I had believed then that we were solid, that the family I'd fought so hard to build had roots too deep to be shaken. My hand trembled as I touched that photo. It sliced my finger, the edge sharper than I expected. A bead of blood bloomed bright red. The wound was small, but it burned, just like this revelation. Tiny cuts sometimes hurt the most. I wrapped my finger in a tissue and sat heavily in the chair. Memories unspooled like film reels I couldn't shut off. Mia's bridal shower. When I gave her the lace tablecloth my mother had embroidered by hand. She cried and said, "You're like a second mother to me." I had believed her. The countless Sunday dinners I hosted, where she laughed at Ethan's dry jokes and refilled his glass, a daughter-in-law playing her role perfectly. The afternoons when she lingered in my kitchen, asking about recipes, pretending to be a pupil while secretly carving a path into my husband's heart. How long had it been going on? Since before the wedding? Since the first time she crossed our threshold? The thought made me nauseous. By evening, Grant called. His voice was steady, clinical, as though describing the weather. "They've rented the loft more than once. Same unit, third floor. Lease is under a corporate shell, but I traced it. Payments align with Ethan's secondary account." My mouth went dry. Secondary account? Yes. Opened 3 years ago. Regular transfers. Cash withdrawals that don't match his reported expenses. 3 years. Almost exactly the length of Mia and Caleb's marriage. The implications sliced deeper than any photo. This wasn't an affair of months, but of years. After the call, I poured myself a glass of water but couldn't drink. My throat refused it. I stood in the kitchen staring at the glass until condensation dripped onto my hand. Drops cold as betrayal itself. I pulled out the envelope of photos again. The images stared back at me. Ethan's tenderness, Mia's tilted smile. The kiss that erased decades of my life. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection startled me. My face, lined with 40 years of labor and sacrifice, looked foreign. My eyes hollow, my mouth thin. I remembered the girl I once was. Nora at 20, hair long and shining, apron tied tight as she served pie slices to regulars at the first Nora's diner. Ethan had sat at the counter then, promising me the world. He had said he admired my strength, my fire. I had believed I'd found a man who respected me. Now that girl stared back only in fragments. The woman in the mirror was older, harder, carved hollow by betrayal. I whispered to her, "You were a fool." The house felt heavier that night. The photographs in their frames mocked me, smiling family portraits that hid rot behind their glass. Ethan's laugh echoed in my head. Mia's lipstick red smile haunting every shadow. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table with the envelope of proof, running my fingers over its edges like a wee *p*, and I hadn't yet wielded. By midnight I rose and walked to the garage again. The truck sat silent. I opened the glove box, half expecting the evidence to vanish like a nightmare. But the tube remained. The napkin still reeked of perfume. Proof didn't disappear just because I wanted it to. I placed them back exactly as I'd found them, careful, deliberate. My phone held photos of everything now, each image time-stamped, organized, undeniable. When I returned inside, I pulled Caleb's old baseball glove from the shelf. It smelled of leather, dust, and memories. I held it tight to my chest. He had trusted me as a boy, running into my arms after games, believing I could fix anything. How could I ever tell him that his wife and his father had betrayed him? The truth would *ll him. But silence was *ling me. By dawn I made my decision. I would not confront Ethan yet. I would not scream or beg. I would watch, record, gather. Betrayal this vile deserved to be exposed in full daylight, stripped of denial. The penthouse balcony kiss was not just a betrayal of vows. It was the demolition of a family. And I would make sure everyone saw the ruins. The phone call came in the late afternoon, when the diner was closing and the smell of fried bacon and vanilla still clung to my apron. Grant's voice was steady as ever, but what he said hollowed me out. "I've got something you need to hear." He sent the file before I could respond. I put in my earbuds and pressed play. The first voice was hers, Mia's. Not the sweet tone she used with Caleb. Not the shy giggle she had used at family dinners. This voice was sharp, cold, commanding. "Hurry up with the fake contract. I want the entire chain of Nora's. Get that old hag out of the house." My knees buckled. I gripped the counter, the diner suddenly spinning. Old hag. That was me. 40 years of work reduced to 2 words spat with contempt. Then came Ethan's reply, calm, measured, like a man discussing the weather. "Nora knows nothing. She trusts me. Leave it to me." I pressed pause. My hands shook. This wasn't just adultery. It was robbery. They weren't content with sneaking kisses on balconies or whispered lies in restaurants. They wanted everything: the diner, the name, the legacy that bore my sweat and blood. For decades, Nora's wasn't just a business. It was survival. I remembered the first morning I opened those doors. The smell of fresh biscuits, the chipped plates, the old coffee machine sputtering like a train. Caleb had been 5, coloring in the corner while I poured coffee for truckers. Ethan had promised he'd help with the business side. But help never came. I bought new ovens with my tips. I scrubbed grease until my knuckles bled. I negotiated with landlords, pleaded with bankers, and stitched together every thread of success. Ethan never set foot in the kitchen. He only wore the success like a badge at family gatherings, boasting about our diner chain, though his contribution had been absences and excuses. And now he and Mia wanted to take it. Press play again. The recording continued, captured in the echo of a parking lot. Mia. "We'll need the notary lined up. Someone who doesn't ask questions." Ethan. "I've got someone. Just sign where I tell you." Mia. "Good. The sooner we push her out, the sooner we can expand. She's too old-fashioned. She holds everything back." Her laughter followed, sharp as glass. I ripped the earbuds out. The diner was silent, but their voices still rang in my skull. I looked around me. The checkered floors worn thin by decades of footsteps, the chalkboard with daily specials written in my own hand, the framed articles praising Nora's as the backbone of small-town flavor. Every corner whispered sacrifice. I had raised this place like another child. And now my husband and daughter-in-law plotted to *ll it, to bleed me out of it like I was nothing but a placeholder. I walked to the office in the back where files stacked in neat piles. Old invoices. Payroll. Contracts. I ran my hand over them, each folder a reminder of battles fought and won. I had given up youth, health, and joy for this. Ethan had given me betrayal. Mia had given me scorn. I pulled out a blank notebook and began to log everything. Dates, times, locations. The Tucson receipt. The photos of balcony kisses. The recordings of whispered plots. Every piece was evidence. The smell of bacon and vanilla clung to me as I wrote, A grotesque reminder of all the mornings I'd risen before dawn to serve others while my own family plotted my ruin. That evening, more photos arrived from Grant. Ethan's pickup, parked in a quiet lot. Inside, Mia sat with a pen in hand, red ink marking papers stacked high. Ethan leaned close, nodding, his expression serious. Grant's text followed. She's editing contracts. Notary involved. Friendly signature expected. I'll identify. I zoomed in on the photo. The sight of her bent over those papers, the same hands that once kneaded dough beside me in my kitchen, the same hands I had held when welcoming her into the family, now scribbling over my life's work. Her lipstick smudged, her hair falling loose, her focus sharp. She looked like a predator dissecting prey. The nausea rose again. I pressed a hand to my mouth, breathing through it. I remembered when Mia first walked into our home, Caleb's shy smile introducing her. She had been young, nervous, eyes wide with eagerness to please. She had called me Mrs. Morgan then, and I had laughed, insisting she call me Nora. You're family now, I told her. She had hugged me, whispering thank you. Family. That word was ash in my mouth now. The next day, Ethan came home late, his tie loose, the smell of cologne and smoke clinging to him. I had set dinner, roast chicken, his favorite once upon a time. He sat across from me, his face composed, as though the mask hadn't already cracked. Between bites, he cleared his throat. Some complicated papers at work. Maybe you'll review them, see if they look fine? Just to be safe. His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed the flicker of calculation. He was testing the waters. I forced a smile. Of course, dear. Bring them when you're ready. Inside, my fury burned cold. Later that night, as I washed dishes, I heard his voice low by the window. I moved silently closer. Ethan. Come tomorrow, no hotel needed. Nora's leaving. It'll be easier here. Mia's giggle answered, high and cruel. The sound curdled my stomach. My hands gripped the sink so hard my knuckles whitened. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I pulled Caleb's old voice recorder from the drawer. He had used it in college to record lectures. I replaced the batteries, switched it to continuous capture, and tucked it behind the headboard in our bedroom. I synced it to my phone, silent, invisible. If Ethan and Mia wanted to stage their schemes in my home, let them. My walls would listen. My furniture would witness. My recorder would remember. Later, when I went to the garage to tidy, my eyes landed on the tube again under the seat. I picked it up, my breath shallow. Its plastic cap unscrewed with ease. I fetched a bottle from the storage shelf. Acid used for cleaning drains, clear and biting. Carefully, I poured it in drop by drop until the tube was heavy with poison. The liquid dripped like venom, slow and inevitable. I wiped the nozzle clean, screwed the cap tight, and slid it back under the seat. My hands were steady, my face calm, but inside I was fire. No smoke trap this time. No hiding. When the time came, their own screams would summon the audience. I closed the truck door softly, smoothing the floor mat, making sure every detail looked untouched. As I stepped back into the house, the silence wrapped around me. A silence no longer heavy with grief, but sharpened into purpose. Let Ethan think I trusted him. Let Mia believe I was the old hag blind to their plot. I was documenting, waiting, preparing. And when the trap closed, it would not just be adultery exposed. It would be theft, treachery, and greed laid bare for everyone to see. This was no longer about saving a marriage. That was already dead. This was about defending my life's work. And I would not let them take it. The night after hearing Mia call me that old hag in the recording, I set the table with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the last jar of pickled green beans I'd been saving since summer. Ethan sat across from me, his face unreadable, his hands moving with rehearsed calm. I had spent decades learning the languages of his silence, the way he tapped his fork when nervous, the way he rubbed his thumb against the rim of his glass when lying. Tonight, both gestures were there. Between mouthfuls, he looked at me and said lightly, "There are some complicated papers, maybe you'll review them? Just in case." I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Of course. Leave them on my desk. He thought he was luring me into his scheme. He didn't know I had already seen the photos, heard the recordings, smelled the betrayal in his car. He didn't know that every word he uttered now was being weighed and logged. Each syllable another nail in his coffin. That night I pretended exhaustion. I cleared the plates, rinsed the glasses, and told him I needed to lie down. He lingered by the window, phone pressed to his ear. I listened from the hallway, my pulse steady. Ethan, come tomorrow. No need for hotels. Nora's leaving. The house will be free. Mia's voice answered, muffled but clear enough. A high, delighted giggle. It was the sound of triumph. A rival's laugh echoing in my own home. I walked to Caleb's old room, pulled his college recorder from a box of mementos, and slid in new batteries. I set it to continuous capture and hid it behind the headboard of our bed, wires tucked behind an old family photo frame. My phone synced to the recorder with one tap. I tested it. My own whisper came back to me, faint but audible. My bedroom would become a courtroom. Every word they spoke would testify against them. But recording wasn't enough. They needed exposure. Proof so loud it couldn't be denied. The next morning I played the role I'd perfected for decades. The supportive wife. Over breakfast I sipped coffee and asked about his meetings, tilting my head in the same way I used to when I believed. He smiled faintly, relieved. He thought his secret was safe. While he left for work I went to the garage. The pickup sat like a beast in hibernation, hiding its filth beneath a shell of normalcy. I lifted the floor mat again and retrieved the lubricant tube I had already tampered with. Its cap gleamed innocently, hiding the venom inside. The acid sloshed when I shook it, invisible but lethal. I slid it back under the seat, positioning it exactly as I'd found it weeks before. My movements were careful, deliberate. Nothing looked disturbed. I stood in the garage, the faint smell of gasoline surrounding me, and realized I felt no fear. My heart was calm, my hands steady. Once betrayal would have shattered me. Now it fueled me. That night, Ethan lingered in the doorway watching me fold laundry. His face was strange, cautious, searching. "You're quiet these days," he said softly. "I'm tired," I replied, folding Caleb's old t-shirt with clinical precision. "Running the diners wears me out more than it used to." He nodded, satisfied with my excuse. He had always underestimated me, always believed I was weaker than I was. That underestimation was now my armor. At midnight, I heard him whispering again near the window. "Ethan." "Yes, tomorrow. Don't worry. Nora will be gone." Mia's laugh rang again through the dark. I gripped the edge of the doorframe until my nails dug into the wood. Their laughter in my house, it was almost unbearable. But I stayed silent. Silence was my P***N. When he returned to bed, I lay still, feigning deep sleep. My eyes remained open, fixed on the ceiling. I could hear his breath, steady, untroubled. My own chest rose and fell with practiced calm. The next morning I left a note on the counter. "Gone to Sedona for a meeting. Back late." Ethan would believe it. I often drove long distances for supplier contracts. Instead, I walked across the street to Mrs. Alvarez's house. She had been my neighbor for 30 years. A widow with sharp eyes and a heart too big for her small frame. "Of course, Nora," she said when I explained. "You can sit by the window. You'll see everything." From her living room I had the perfect vantage point. My own house sat across the street, its front door visible in full. At 10 o'clock sharp, a taxi pulled up. Mia stepped out, her disguise almost laughable, dark glasses, a light dress, a scarf around her neck. She looked like a teenager sneaking out, not a married woman betraying her husband and her family. Ethan opened the door quickly, glancing up and down the street before ushering her inside. His body language screamed guilt, but he didn't see me. He never saw me. I put on my headphones, connected to the recorder hidden in the bedroom. Laughter filtered through, then the clink of glasses. Their footsteps creaked across the wooden floor. Then the low, unmistakable sounds of an Macy. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe. Each sound was a knife, but I had to endure. Then it came. A sudden high-pitched scream. "Mia. What the hell is this? It burns." "Ethan. Damn it, what did you pour in here? It burns." The panic in their voices cut through the headphones. I sat straighter, my grip tightening on Mrs. Alvarez's armrest. Their shrieks grew louder, overlapping, desperate. The acid had found them. I opened my eyes and looked across the street. The house remained still, its windows closed, its facade calm. But inside, chaos reigned. Mrs. Alvarez looked at me, alarmed. Nora, do you hear that? I forced my face blank. Yes. Outside, neighbors were emerging from their houses, curiosity drawing them toward the commotion. Some already had phones in hand, dialing 911. I sat still, my breaths measured, my heart steady. For decades I had been silent in my suffering. Now their screams carried the truth I had hidden. The trap had been set. And it had sprung. Dawn broke pale and cold, the kind of morning that looks innocent on the surface. Birds chirped. Sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns. A new day pretending at normal. But I knew what was coming. I left a note on the counter. Sedona meeting. Back late. Don't wait for dinner. My handwriting was steady, practiced. Ethan would believe it without hesitation. He had always believed I was predictable. He had always believed I would never leave him, never lie to him, never trap him. By 8 o'clock, I was across the street at Mrs. Alvarez's house. She poured me coffee and pulled the curtains just wide enough for me to see my own front door. Are you sure you want to do this, Nora? She asked softly. I have no choice, I said. My voice didn't tremble. At 10 o'clock, a taxi stopped in front of my house. Out stepped Mia, sunglasses too large, dress too bright for the hour. She looked like a teenager sneaking to a lover, not a wife meeting her husband's father. Ethan appeared at the door, glancing left, then right like a thief checking for guards. He waved her in quickly. The door shut behind them. In my headphones, connected to the recorder I'd hidden in the bedroom, I heard laughter. The clink of glasses. Shoes dropped onto the floor. Their voices lowered into murmurs. Then the sound I had dreaded and anticipated all at once. Moans, rhythmic and raw. Mrs. Alvarez reached for my hand, her knuckles white. I stayed perfectly still. Minutes later came the first scream. Mia. What the hell is this? Her voice cracked, jagged with panic. Ethan. Damn it. It burns. What did you? Their words dissolved into shrieks, overlapping, desperate. The acid I had poured into the tube had done its work. I didn't flinch. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. From outside, faint thuds echoed, them stumbling, colliding with furniture. Then Mia again, sobbing now. Get it off. It burns. Ethan roared, half in pain, half in rage. The neighborhood began to stir. A curtain across the street twitched. A man watering his lawn froze, tilting his head. Another neighbor stepped onto her porch. Within seconds, more followed. Phones lifted. Calls placed. Something's wrong in there, someone shouted. I sipped my coffee. Sirens would come soon. But first came the chorus of whispers. Nora's house. Ethan and Mia. What's happening? The front door burst open. Ethan staggered into the yard, shirt half open, his face twisted. Mia followed, clutching at herself, screaming. Her sunglasses had fallen, revealing mascara streaks cutting down her cheeks. Neighbors gasped. Someone screamed. Another laughed in disbelief. Is that Mia? A voice hissed. With Ethan? Another answered, horrified. My God, her father-in-law? Phones rose higher. Screens flashed. In the space of a minute, my private betrayal became public spectacle. Ethan barked. No pictures. Stop filming. His voice cracked, raw with pain and fear. But no one listened. Mrs. Alvarez squeezed my arm. Do you want me to call Caleb? Not yet, I whispered. Let him see with his own eyes. The shrieks grew louder. Mia stumbled against Ethan, clutching him like a lifeline. He shoved her away, his own agony too great to disguise. They both collapsed to the grass, writhing, howling. The first fire truck arrived within minutes, its siren slicing through the air. Red lights strobed across the quiet suburban street. My heart seized when I saw who jumped from the truck. Caleb. My son. His firefighter's helmet glinted in the sun. He sprinted toward the house, shouting orders. Check for smoke. Get hoses ready. But there was no smoke. No fire. Only disgrace. Through my headphones, the recorder still captured everything. Dad. Oh God, Dad, it hurts. Mia's voice. Caleb froze mid-step. His helmet tilted. He had heard. Dad, he whispered, disbelief shaking his tone. He pushed into the house anyway, as protocol demanded. only to find nothing but toppled furniture and the stench of perfume and sweat. Then he turned back, following the sound of screams to the yard. And there they were. His father and his wife half-dressed, entangled in pain and shame. I saw the moment realization struck him. His shoulders stiffened. His mouth opened but no words came. His eyes darted between them. Then to the watching crowd. A medic beside him muttered, "Jesus Christ." Another firefighter whispered, "Unbelievable." Caleb's jaw clenched. He barked at his team, his voice breaking. "Sheets! Cover them! Now!" The crowd pressed closer. Neighbors whispered, laughed nervously, snapped photos they would later delete but never forget. Father-in-law with daughter-in-law? No way. Poor Nora, 40 years for this? God, what a shame. Ethan tried to sit up, spitting rage. Get them out. Shut the door. But it was too late. The spectacle was unleashed. Mia wailed, clutching at Caleb's sleeve. "Baby, please." But Caleb yanked his arm free. His face was stone. Sheets were thrown over them, thin fabric failing to mask the truth. They were lifted onto stretchers, their shame carried into the waiting ambulance. The crowd parted, murmurs rising into a roar. I removed my headphones. The house across the street hummed with tension, neighbors craning for better views. Beside me, Mrs. Alvarez whispered, "They'll never recover from this." I didn't answer. The sirens faded as the ambulance pulled away, carrying with it the wreckage of my marriage and my family. But not my dignity. That I had reclaimed. The wail of sirens faded into the distance, but the whispers remained. Neighbors lingered in clusters on the lawns, their faces pale with shock, flushed with gossip. Some clutched phones, reviewing the videos they had just recorded. Others shook their heads with pity. All of them had seen too much. My house, once the place of birthday parties, Sunday dinners, and Christmas lights, was now a stage where betrayal had screamed itself hoarse. Through Mrs. Alvarez's window I watched the crowd scatter slowly, like embers after a blaze. Yet no one truly left. They hovered near driveways, voices lowered but urgent. "Ethan? With Mia? No, it can't be. I saw it with my own eyes. He carried her out himself. And Caleb, my God, his own father and his wife. Poor Nora. How much can one woman take?" The words swirled, carried on the same air that once smelled of fresh pies from my kitchen. Now it reeked of scandal. Beside me, Mrs. Alvarez turned from the window, her face tight. "You don't have to listen, Nora. You can stay here." I shook my head. "I want to hear every word. They took too much from me already. They won't take the truth." Hours blurred. By late afternoon I walked home, stepping past the trampled grass and the shattered privacy of my yard. The door still hung slightly ajar from when paramedics rushed inside. The living room bore the scars of chaos. A chair toppled, a glass shattered on the floor. A trail of disruption leading down the hallway like a crime scene. It was a crime scene. Only the crime wasn't theft or assault. It was betrayal, complete and unrestrained. I sat at the kitchen table where I had first seen Ethan's phone glow with that cursed message. "You were incredible tonight, Dad Redheart." Now the house was silent, but the echoes of screams lingered like smoke clinging to drapes. The silence didn't last. By dusk, the front yard filled again. Reporters this time, drawn by the wildfire of gossip. Someone had leaked the story. Perhaps it was a neighbor, perhaps a firefighter with a loose tongue. It didn't matter. The scandal was out. I heard their voices through the windows. "Do you confirm Ethan Morgan was taken to the hospital with his daughter-in-law Mia? Was there an accident? Was it domestic? Is Nora Morgan prepared to make a statement?" Flashes lit the glass like lightning. I didn't open the door. I didn't answer. Let them starve outside my walls. The story fed itself without me. But one person did enter. At 8 o'clock, Caleb arrived. He didn't knock. He stepped inside, his fire captain's jacket still smudged with soot. His face was gray, his eyes hollow. For a moment I thought he might collapse. He leaned against the doorframe, helmet dangling loosely from his hand. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Tell me it isn't true." The words pierced me deeper than any betrayal. I stood slowly, walked to him and placed my hand on his arm. "I wish I could. But you saw it." His eyes brimmed, then closed. A long silence hung between us, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of reporters outside. Finally he whispered, "Why them? Why, Dad? Why her?" No answer could soften that wound. "I don't know," I said quietly. "Some people choose destruction when they're handed devotion." Caleb dropped the helmet onto the floor with a hollow clatter. His shoulders sagged. "I carried them out, Mom. My own wife. My own father. Half-dressed screaming. In front of my team. In front of the neighbors." I reached for him but he stepped back, his fists clenching. "Do you know what they said? My men? Chief, I'm sorry. Sorry. As if I'm a victim in my own fire. I can't face them again. Not like this." I steadied my voice. "This isn't your shame, Caleb. It's theirs." He looked at me then, his face hardening. "I'll never forgive them." Neither would I. The next day, the hospital became the new stage. Reporters crowded its entrance, cameras flashing as stretchers rolled past. Ethan and Mia tried to shield their faces with sheets, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen. Everyone knew. Inside, whispers followed them down sterile corridors. Nurses exchanged looks. Orderlies snickered behind hands. Even the doctor's professionalism couldn't mask disgust. "They'll recover," one medic muttered near me. "Mostly surface burns. More pain than danger." I almost laughed at the irony. The fire hadn't scarred them. Their own choices had. When I walked into the waiting area, conversations hushed. I carried a plain envelope under my arm. The photos, the recordings, the receipts, all neatly organized. I also carried divorce papers, freshly signed by my attorney. Caleb sat slumped against the wall, his head in his hands. I placed the envelope in his lap. He looked at me confused. "Evidence," I said. "Everything they tried to hide. Everything they tried to take." His fingers brushed the envelope, then recoiled as if it burned. "Mom, I can't." "You don't have to. Just know the truth is ours now." We sat in silence until a nurse stepped out, asking if the family wanted to visit. I almost spat at the word. Family. Still I walked in. Ethan lay on the bed, bandages wrapping his arms. His face twisted when he saw me. "Nora, wait." I cut him off, placing the divorce papers on the table. 40 years end here. Sign. And vanish from my life and Caleb's. Mia sobbed in the other bed. Her hair tangled, her makeup streaked. "Baby, please," she begged Caleb, who had followed me in. "Forgive me. I was stupid. I didn't mean anything." He didn't answer. He turned his face away. Ethan reached for my hand, his eyes pleading. "Nora, You chose," I said, pulling back. The room filled with silence thicker than any smoke. Even the machines seemed to hush. In that moment I realized something bitter. Their wounds would heal. Their shame might fade. But the scars they left in us, in Caleb and me, would remain forever. When I left the hospital, the night air was cool, the sky sharp with stars. Reporters still hovered, hoping for a statement. I gave them none. My silence was enough. The truth had already been exposed. No smoke alarm had summoned the crowd. No staged fire had set the scene. Their own screams had been the signal, their own disgrace the spectacle. And the world had answered. The emergency ward smelled of antiseptic and betrayal. It clung to the walls like mildew, heavy and inescapable. I sat in a plastic chair, envelope clutched in my lap, while the nurse at the station whispered with another behind her hand. They thought I couldn't hear. They thought no one could. That's them, isn't it? The ones caught together? Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Disgusting. And the poor wife. Can you imagine? I didn't flinch. Let them talk. The whispers were lighter than the screams that had already shattered the neighborhood. The doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. His tone was clinical, detached. Surface-level chemical burns. Painful but not life-threatening. They'll need ointment, hydration, rest. He glanced at me, hesitant. Would you like to see them? I rose without a word. Caleb followed, though his steps dragged as if the weight of the world clung to his boots. We entered the room. Ethan lay propped on pillows, his arms wrapped in gauze, his face pale. His eyes darted to me instantly, full of something between shame and desperation. Beside him, Mia curled on her side, her hair a matted mess, her face streaked with tears. She looked younger than ever, a child caught in the ruins of her own choices. For a long moment no one spoke. The beeping of monitors filled the silence like a metronome counting down to judgment. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "Nora." His voice was hoarse. "Please. Let me explain." I set the envelope on the rolling table between us. Divorce papers on top, photos beneath. My hand lingered on the stack for only a second. 40 years end here. Sign them. And vanish from my life, and Caleb's. Mia whimpered, turning toward my son. "Baby, please. It was a mistake. Terrible mistake. I was lonely. I was stupid. Don't let this ruin us." Caleb's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists at his sides. He didn't look at her. He stared at the floor, his voice flat. "You ruined us." She sat up quickly, wincing as her bandages shifted. No, listen." She reached for his hand. He pulled away so violently she almost toppled. Ethan tried again, leaning forward, his gauze crinkling. "Nora, don't do this. We can work through it. I lost my way, but it doesn't erase everything we've built." I laughed, low and bitter. "Everything we built? You mean what I built while you played at being important? While you told me you were too tired, too busy, too stressed, but somehow never too tired for her." His mouth opened, then closed. No defense. No denial. Only the sag of a man caught in his own net. Mia's voice broke through, shrill. "You don't understand, Caleb. Your father, he was there for me when you weren't. He understood me. It wasn't about betrayal, it was about—" "Stop." Caleb's voice thundered, startling even the machines. He finally looked at her, his eyes ablaze. "Don't you dare twist this. Don't you dare make it about me. You slept with my father. My father. There is no excuse." Mia's face crumpled. She buried it in her hands, sobbing loudly, but her tears slid off Caleb like rain on stone. I pulled the chair closer to Ethan's bed. My voice was calm, almost gentle. "Do you remember the night we opened the first diner? You said you'd help with the books. You said we were a team. But you disappeared. Left me to scrub dishes until dawn. That was the first time you betrayed me. I forgave you. Then came the nights you stayed late at the office. I forgave those too. Decades of silence. Decades of excuses. And now this. With her." He swallowed hard. "I thought you'd never find out." The honesty of it was almost worse than denial. He hadn't regretted. He hadn't stopped. He had simply counted on my blindness. I opened the envelope and spread the contents across the table. Photographs of their balcony kiss, receipts, recordings transcribed word for word. The proof of adultery. The proof of theft. The plan to strip me of Nora's. Caleb's eyes widened as he read Mia's words in black and white. "Get that old hag out of the house." He staggered back a step as though struck. "You called my mother that?" His voice cracked with disbelief. Mia sobbed harder, rocking in the bed. "I didn't mean it. I was angry. You meant every word." I cut in coldly. "You meant it when you kissed him. You meant it when you plotted with him to steal from me. You meant it every time you laughed behind my back." The room felt smaller, the air denser. The truth had stripped them bare. Ethan reached for me again, his bandaged hand trembling. "Nora, please. I love you. I never stopped." My voice sharpened like a blade. "You loved what I built. You loved the shelter I gave you. You loved the life I carved from my own flesh. But me? No. If you had, you wouldn't be lying in this bed with your son's wife sobbing beside you." His hand dropped limp. Caleb stepped to the door, his face pale, his body rigid. He didn't look back at Mia. He didn't look at Ethan. He only paused beside me. "Mom," he said softly, "we need to go." I nodded. As we left, Ethan's voice rose, desperate. "Nora, wait. Please." Mia's sobs crescendoed, broken, pleading. "Caleb, don't leave me. Don't abandon me." But we kept walking. In the hallway, Caleb leaned against the wall, his breath shuddering. He buried his face in his hands. "Why them, Mom? Why did it have to be them?" I put my arms around him, holding him like I had when he was a boy with scraped knees. My own eyes burned, but no tears fell. Because some people destroy what they cannot deserve. And because they believed we'd be too blind to see. We stood there until his breathing steadied, until the weight of 40 years settled between us like ash after fire. The nurse approached, handing me a tube of ointment for their burns. Apply this 3 times a day. It will help. I didn't touch it. I set it on the counter without a word. Let their pain linger. Let it remind them. When we walked out into the night air, reporters swarmed shouting questions. I met their cameras with a steady gaze. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken louder than I ever could. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that day never left. The town had moved on as towns do, always hungry for fresh scandal. But the whispers never fully died. Every time I walked into a grocery store or church, eyes followed. Some full of pity, some of admiration, some of the cruel curiosity that feeds on another's suffering. And yet strangely I felt lighter. For the first time in decades I wasn't carrying Ethan's excuses on my back. I wasn't straining to keep a family facade polished. The truth had exploded into the open, and though it scorched me, it also freed me. The diner became my fortress. Nora's, with its chipped counters and greasy fryers, became the place where I rebuilt myself brick by brick. The bell above the door rang constantly now. Customers poured in not just for pie and pancakes but for something else, for me. They looked at me with a new kind of respect, the kind given to a woman who had endured the unendurable and refused to fall. "Mrs. Morgan, you're strong," people told me in hushed voices as they paid their bills. "You're an example." I didn't feel strong. I felt hollow. But I nodded, let them believe strength was what they saw. Hollow or not, I kept going. Caleb moved in with me 2 days after the hospital confrontation. He arrived with a single duffel bag, his firefighter's uniform folded neatly inside. His eyes red from sleepless nights. "I can't stay in that house with her things," he said simply. I didn't argue. I cleared a drawer for him, made up the guest room, cooked him dinner like I had when he was a boy. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence heavy but companionable. For the first week he barely spoke. He rose early, left for the firehouse, came home late, and ate in silence. But slowly words began to return. "Mom," he asked one night as he pushed away an empty plate, "can you bake a lime pie this weekend? Like you used to?" I looked at him surprised. His voice had been small, almost boyish. For a moment I saw the child who once tugged my apron strings, begging for extra slices. "Yes," I said softly, "but you'll help with the crust." A faint smile tugged at his lips, the first since his world had burned. Together we began to build a new rhythm. He handled phone calls at the diner, carried trays when the staff was overwhelmed. I baked, kneaded, served. We didn't talk about Ethan. We didn't talk about Mia. We didn't need to. Silence was enough. Outside, the world devoured the scandal. Someone had filmed Ethan and Mia being carried out on stretchers, their shame covered in thin sheets. The video spread like wildfire across town, then further into nearby cities. People I hadn't spoken to in years called to offer sympathy, or to dig for details. I answered none of them. Let the world watch. Let them whisper. Their disgrace was already eternal. On Sundays I joined a small cooking club at the community center. We sat beneath stained glass windows trading recipes, kneading dough side by side. For the first time in decades I did something purely for myself. On Saturdays I walked with Mrs. Alvarez through the park. She updated me on neighborhood gossip, who was selling their house, whose kids were misbehaving. I listened but rarely commented. What was there to say? My life had already been the greatest scandal. Sometimes in the stillness of night I thought of Ethan. Where was he now? Living in some rented apartment, too ashamed to show his face? Was Mia still beside him, clinging to the ruin they had built together? I didn't know. I didn't care. Their names had become ghosts in my house. What mattered was what remained. My name, my work, my son, myself. One evening as Caleb and I closed the diner after a long day, he paused at the door, looking at the glowing sign, Nora's. "You kept it all together," he said quietly. I looked at him. No. I let it fall apart so we could see the truth. He nodded, as if those words unlocked something. At night I sometimes lay awake, the silence of the house pressing heavy against my ears. It was no longer the silence of waiting for Ethan's key to turn in the lock, or the silence of holding my breath while he muttered lies. It was a new silence, mine. A silence I had earned. People said I was strong. But the truth was simpler. I had been broken, and I had chosen not to stay broken. The irony bit deep. Ethan and Mia had lost everything they schemed for. Secrecy, respect, the diner, the family. Caleb and I had lost our illusions. But in that loss we found something tougher than love. Clarity. One night, Caleb came home late from the firehouse, exhaustion etched into his face. He set his helmet on the table, sat down heavily and said, "Mom, I'll never understand why he did it." I poured him a glass of water, sat across from him. Because some people mistake destruction for freedom. They think tearing down what others built makes them powerful. But it only makes them small. He nodded, his eyes glassy. We sat in silence, the kind that doesn't wound but soothes. I had lost my husband. I had lost my daughter-in-law. But I had not lost myself. Weeks turned into months. The diner thrived. Caleb healed slowly. I healed differently. And Ethan and Mia faded into shadows. Their names spoken only in whispers, always with disgust. In the end, the scandal gave me something unexpected: space. Space to breathe, to live, to rebuild. I had kept what mattered. My name, my work, my son, myself. Everything else was smoke. And so to whoever listens now, I say this. If you stay until the end of my story, tell me which city you're listening from. Then go and make something no one can steal. Not a husband. Not a lover. Not even your own children. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't take everything. It only takes the illusions. And sometimes that's the beginning of freedom.